We're just letting in our delegates just now, and then we'll be underway in just a moment. So again, once again, good morning to our guests in Houston, and good afternoon to our guests in the UK. And we're just letting people enter just now.
I think, Brett, we'll have to start to keep the time.
Yes.
But Leslie will keep an eye on the waiting room and keep letting everybody in.
Okay. Okay. So good morning, everyone in Houston, and good afternoon, everyone in Aberdeen, and welcome to the 9th annual Aberdeen Houston Gateway. And today is aimed at bringing together all of the many contacts and wonderful people and opportunities and ideas that I have come across in my 9 years in Houston. Now, we do have a very busy timeline today. We have 9 speakers today. So we have 3 days in total. The first day today is an overview of the market and an update on Houston. Tomorrow, we will focus on energy transition and subsea. And the third day, we will focus on aerospace. Now, because we have a very large audience today, if I could ask everybody to kindly keep their microphones on mute, just for the speakers when they're presenting. So we've still got some people joining us as we speak. So once again, good morning if you're just joining us from Houston, and good afternoon if you're joining us from the UK or Europe. And delighted that so many people have been able to join us today. So we're recording today's sessions as well, so they are available afterwards. And once again, just to recap that we have 3 days with 3 different themes. Today is an overview of the market. Tomorrow is energy transition. And the final day is aerospace. So we've still got guests joining us, Stacey, so I'm just giving a quick moment for that, for everyone to get themselves settled and comfortable. Okay. So once again, good morning, Houston, and good afternoon in the UK. So what I'm going to do is to get the first day and the 9th annual Aberdeen Houston Gateway underway, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, and I'm delighted that to give the formal welcome from the Aberdeen end, we have the Lord Provost of Aberdeen, who is also currently the President of the World Energy City Partnership, Barney Crockett. So Lord Provost, could I hand over to you, please, to do the welcome from Aberdeen? Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed for that. And there'll be very little formal about it. You know, this is Aberdeen is very much the key partner with Houston. Houston is the most important partner that we have, and we're absolutely delighted to foster the links further. We are the sister city, and very proud of that. First of all, thank you very much to the people in Houston for getting up so early this morning to join with us. I realize that it's been quite a difficult time for Houston. I follow the news very regularly, and I realize there have been trials and tribulations, but that the prospects are extremely bright. And I know that people are coming from right across the United States, but particularly maybe from the West Coast, to seek the greater economic opportunities that Houston is offering. And I'm so much looking forward to getting back to Houston. I've missed it very much indeed. And I look forward also to the folks from Houston coming over here. I see so many of my friends in that audience that we're going to be looking forward to welcome to the city of Aberdeen and welcome them further. I think that the agenda for the few 3 days is really, really big inspiration. I think that the two things, energy transformation and subsea, are two crucial elements for Aberdeen, and we really hope to hear a lot about that. And of course, aerospace is completely new to many of us, but what an exciting prospect to work in tandem with organizations between Houston and Aberdeen. So I'm very, very much looking forward to it. I'm very much looking forward to being in Houston in the flesh fairly soon. And I look forward to welcoming people here. But let's make the absolute most of these opportunities that we can to see what joint work can be done, what we can learn from one another. Thanks very much, Brett. And thank you, everybody. Look forward to everything that's going to happen in the next few days. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Provost, for those words to the people in Aberdeen, but also the people of Houston, and reminding us of really just how many links and the friendship that exists between us all. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our second speaker. Richard Hyde is the Consul General in Houston, Texas, covering a number of the southern states, but is based in Houston, Texas. And Richard took up his position of Consul General just after the last OTC in June 19, and has already, I know, made trips to Aberdeen. And Richard, could I please ask you to say a few words to everyone from Houston, please?
Yes, thanks, Brett. Thanks for the opportunity to take part in what is a kind of great celebration of the Houston-Aberdeen relationship. It's always a pleasure, of course, to share a platform with the Lord Provost as well. He is a true champion of the relationship between these two great cities, and we look forward to getting him back to Houston very soon. This event marks I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to talk more about the general role here rather than welcome. You don't need to be welcome to Houston. You guys, Aberdeen is always welcome in Houston. So this event marks a fairly painful anniversary for many of us. It's 1 year today since the first UK lockdown. I was actually supposed to be in Aberdeen this time last year to speak at this event before heading off on a tour around the UK to talk about the UK-US Free Trade Agreement. Of course, that trip was cancelled, and we've all settled into a year of Zoom calls ever since. And I really hope that this marks the end, or the beginning of the end, of networking from our kitchen tables. As I said, I'm not going to talk too much about Houston and what's going on in Houston right now, because I know Jeffrey is following me, and nobody is better qualified than Jeffrey to talk up the opportunities in this great city and the linkages with Aberdeen. So I'm going to leave that to Jeffrey, if I may. But I want to talk a little bit about the relationship between the UK and Texas. And pre-COVID, bilateral trade between the UK and Texas had never been better, totaling about $15 billion. To put that into context, we exported more to Texas than we did to Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, and Argentina combined. So more than the 4 biggest economies in Latin America combined, just to Texas. Our work to secure a UK-US free trade agreement continues apace. Change of administration obviously has made that slightly more complex, but we're still working on it. And we're working very hard at state level with the state of Texas to remove barriers to trade. Because what we want to see is, as we come out of COVID, and we want our post-COVID recovery to be all about greater trade between the UK and the US, and for me, between the UK and Texas. And Aberdeen has a big role to play in that. So I'm going to focus a little bit, for a couple of minutes, if I may, on the evolution of my role as Consul General, because I think that's really important to talk about in the context of the Houston-Aberdeen relationship. For my predecessors, the job here was very much about promoting oil and gas. It was about, an event like today would have been all about talking about and celebrating the petrochemical relationship between Aberdeen and Houston. Mm-hmm. However, things have really moved on in the last couple of years since I arrived. Our focus now is on a wide range of commercial sectors. And I'm really happy to see a focus on aerospace this week, as the Lord Provost mentioned on the day 3. And it's brilliant that you've got the Scottish Houstonian ambassador, David Alexander, speaking. David is a great friend of the consulate and a great speaker on all things aerospace. But the energy elements of the job, the energy elements of our work remain really important, though now it's all about the transition to a cleaner and greener future. Houston and Texas remain right at the heart of this work. As you know, the energy industry is at a crossroads. We all talk about it. And the speed of the shift in public and industry opinion on climate change has transformed consumer and shareholder demands on these companies. Majors like BP and Shell have responded really dynamically, and other major US players, and I know you have Exxon speaking on in this event as well. They're responding to the collapse of the oil price last year, the global pandemic, and a cratering of demand for energy accelerated change in the industry. And CERAWeek earlier this month, the big kind of oil and gas, traditionally the big oil and gas event, now a big energy event, there was a dramatic indication there of the pace of the change. Comparing my notes with those of my predecessor from the last event in 2019, the change of tone was startling. The conversation is no longer about the legitimacy of climate change. Now it's all about how to drive forward a resilient, reliable, and inclusive transition. So in the UK, obviously, but also increasingly in the US, and most notably in Texas, all we talk about now is energy transition. Industry leaders recognize that in order to survive, their industry has to embrace this transition, and it really is trying to. The UK will host COP26 just down the road in Texas terms in Glasgow this year. The UK aims to position itself as a global leader on energy transition and climate action. The UK was the first industrialized economy to make a legally binding net zero commitment. And we recently announced a 10-point plan for the green industrial revolution. There's a great video from Boris Johnson announcing this. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. This is going to mobilize about £12 billion of UK government investment towards our domestic low carbon transition. And it's going to open up 3 times as much private sector investment by the end of this decade. So the growing clean energy capability will provide significant export opportunities as the world strives towards net zero. Aberdeen is right at the heart of those efforts in the UK. A clean energy revolution is taking place right here in the United States too. It's underscored by a steady expansion in US renewable energy sector. This is demonstrated in Texas most clearly. Texas, the ancestral home of oil and gas, is now the king of renewables. Texas is the largest producer of wind energy in the Western Hemisphere. Let that settle in. Largest producer of wind. Sorry, somebody needs to just mute. Texas is the...
So event which...
Sorry, we have a conversation going on in the background. So Texas is the biggest energy producer in the Western Hemisphere. And last year, for the first time in history, Texas produced more power from wind than from coal. 10 years ago, coal was king. Last year, coal was pushed into third place by wind, and natural gas is now the biggest producer of energy. In the last couple of years, after a pretty slow start, Texas has seen massive investments in solar. Last year, it's now tripled its capacity last year, and is now the second largest producer of solar energy in the US, with an ambition to overtake overtake California within 5 years. We're seeing almost daily announcements about investments in carbon capture and in hydrogen. Again, 2 things right at the heart of the investments that are going on in and around Aberdeen. So the clean energy industry is generating hundreds of billions of dollars in economic activity, and that's going to grow, and it's going to grow rapidly in the coming years. And there's huge opportunities here for UK businesses in a variety of subsectors. They include electric vehicle infrastructure, electric networks, energy storage, energy efficiency, hydrogen, carbon capture, adaptation, and energy resilience sectors. All of these are relevant to the UK. On both coasts now, we've seen in the US investments in offshore wind for the first time. Again, an industry that hasn't really taken off in the US. BP and Equinor have signed a joint venture on the East Coast. So we're starting to see that transition into offshore wind as well. These are all strengths for the UK. These are all strengths for Aberdeen. So the investments being made at subnational level, the states and the cities will only increase in coming decades as these states and cities strive to meet their own emissions targets. Houston has set some ambitious targets. Investment will follow. BP is a partner of the city of Houston in tackling its own climate action plan. And the new US administration has made clear the federal government will move forward with its pledge to make confronting climate crisis a top priority. they're backing that pledge up with enormous investment, much of it announced during CERAWeek. So the money is there, the ambition is there, the energy is there. We just need you to be there too if you're involved in this sector. So for us, the gateway between Aberdeen and Houston is now energy transition. If you're in that space, if you have enabling technology, or if you're just interested in the sector, we urge people to come and have a look. So have a great conference, and I hope to see some of you again in person sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. I really appreciate you setting the scene. And once again, thanks for so many people joining us this morning. Great to see so many friends and colleagues. And also thank you to the members of the press that have joined us this morning. I know how busy you are, so thank you for logging on as well to hear the update on Houston. Really appreciate that. Okay, without further ado, we've now heard from the Lord Provost in Aberdeen, the Consul General in Houston, Geoffrey at the Greater Houston Partnership. I'd now like to ask Grace McGill, who's founding and senior partner of McGill & Co. In the Central Belt in Scotland, who has also spent a lot of time in Katy, Houston, to give us some thoughts on the immigration situation as it stands. Grace, could I please hand over to you?
Yes, thank you very much. Stacey, yes, perfect, thank you. Next slide. Thank you. So obviously we faced the unprecedented turmoil of this past year, all of us adapting to the restrictions and the challenges of COVID 2020. But as if that wasn't enough, the UK also braced itself for the substantial challenge of Brexit. Enacting what I would say would be the most significant piece of immigration legislation, perhaps of our lifetime, with the ending of freedom of movement of workers, the government pressed ahead with its new Showcase points-based immigration system for this post-COVID, post-Brexit world, while still attempting to convey that the UK was open for business, focusing, as they described it, on attracting the brightest and the best to aid economic recovery. This new system for migrant workers applies to all workers of all nationalities. And today I'll attempt to provide a brief summary of some of the recent changes to the UK system and to highlight the most commonly used immigration routes that are available for overseas workers and for businesses under the new system. I think it's perhaps especially relevant at this time of renewed opportunities with energy transition, as highlighted by Richard Hyde earlier, with Aberdeen and Scotland being at the heart of the energy industry and other sectors with Houston. Geoffrey indeed touched on the issue of foreign-born workforces, showing that Houston has approximately 50%. So I hope that this presentation is of some interest when considering human capital investment and relocation. As shown on the slides, I would like to highlight some of the pertinent changes to the UK immigration system, looking specifically at the skilled worker visa, the intercompany transfer, sole representative visa, with a couple of sector-specific routes to conclude. Next, please. So following the UK's exit from the European Union, freedom movement for EU nationals, as we know, ended in the UK on the 31st of December 2020. And the government introduced the new points-based immigration system for all non-British citizens arriving in the United Kingdom. The visa requirements of this new system will have a massive impact in shaping the United Kingdom's labour force for generations to come. And whilst all working visa routes now essentially come under the same umbrella, the substantive framework has not in fact massively changed, despite some of the rhetoric and the noise outside. The content and the substance of the rules and associated terminology has changed, as there remains within each category a fixed set of requirements to be met. And as they say, the devil is in the detail. But some positive action points to note are that employers, will still require a sponsor licence if they wish to recruit skilled non-British workers in the United Kingdom, which now includes citizens of the EU who have arrived after the 31st of December. Special care is needed when checking documentation of EU nationals resident in the United Kingdom prior to the Brexit guillotine, as there are varying categories and evidential documents that need to be checked. If a company is already in the United Kingdom holding a licensed Tier 2 general visa sponsor, they will automatically be upgraded to the new skilled worker license, and there doesn't need to be a renewed application. There are, of course, strict requirements contained within the sponsor management system, and a license can be downgraded, suspended, or even withdrawn if these requirements and rules are not met and maintained. You will perhaps have heard of the Frontier Worker Permit, which allows workers to come to work in the United Kingdom whilst actually living elsewhere, provided that they commenced employment within the United Kingdom by the 31st of December 2020. A worker must have worked in the United Kingdom at least once every 12 months since commencing the employment, although they may still be able to apply if there have been periods of unemployment during this time. Whilst the withdrawal regulations gives frontier workers a right to enter the United Kingdom to take employment, they do not grant leave to enter or remain. And from the 1st of July 2021, a frontier worker will require a specific worker's permit in order to take up a position of employment. Sponsored workers do need a job offer in a role that is skilled at least a regulation framework level 3, which is a reduction from the previous level 6, and the job must meet one of the occupation codes. Certain jobs are contained within the shortage occupation list, which comprises of those roles deemed by the UK government to be in short supply within the UK resident labour market. So where a role is on the shortage occupation list, 20% of points can be tradable against the salary thresholds. That said, the salary threshold comes with some good news, which has been reduced from 30,000 to 25,600 in general terms, but caution is needed due to the detail contained within the rules for salary calculations. The cap on the number of people who can enter the United Kingdom has actually now been removed, along with the need to require the resident labour market test, although there does have to be a genuine open position. We also have the opening of the new graduate immigration route, which will be available for international students who have completed the degree from summer 2021, enabling those graduates to stay on in employment for 2 or 3 years, dependent upon the actual qualification. Next slide, please. So moving on to the skilled worker visa, this is a route for those who want to come and work for a UK employer, which has seen arguably the most notable changes and refinement. The old Tier 2 general visa has been replaced with the innovative and visionary title of the skilled worker visa, of which there are 4 main mandatory requirements for which the points to be awarded, such as the applicant must have an offer from a licensed UK-sponsored employer, the job and the salary must be at a prescribed level, and the applicant must satisfy the English language requirements. As I touched on earlier, some points are tradable, such as the minimum salary levels, where for a candidate may hold a PhD, and there can be a trade-off with regards to the actual salary for the occupation. Likewise, in the fields of science, engineering, technology, the salary can be varied up to about 80%. There are 2 important features that I wish to just briefly touch on within the new system, important for employers, being one, the certificate of sponsorship. The worker must have been allocated a valid certificate of sponsorship for the job which is offered, and it will need to have been issued by an employer that holds the requisite licence. The certificate of sponsorship must have been issued not more than 3 months before the application for the skilled worker visa. The second point is a genuine vacancy requirement. The Home Office needs to be satisfied that a worker is being sponsored to undertake a genuine vacancy and are capable of undertaking the role for which the certificate of sponsorship has indeed been assigned. Next slide, please. The intercompany transfer remains a very popular route for US companies presently engaged in employment in the UK market, bringing workers to UK subsidiaries and to UK branches. There are two strands of this category. An intercompany transfer, ICT, as we all know, is permissible if you have an employee who you want to bring to the United Kingdom, who has been employed for more than 12 months, unless you've paid them more than 73,900 per annum. And we also have the intercompany graduate trainee visa, which is for those transferring to the UK as part of a graduate training programme for managerial or specialist roles. They must have worked for the company for at least 3 months to be able to qualify for this category. The main requirements as shown are that the skills threshold and the overall minimum salary have not been subject to change. The qualifying level remains at level 6 and the minimum salary of 41,500, or whichever is the going rate, whichever is higher. It's a very useful route for those people who are coming to the United Kingdom on a temporary assignment and who can perhaps not pass the English language test or quite simply don't have time to take it. But time spent on an intercompany transfer or its predecessor, the Tier 2 intercompany transfer visa, cannot be combined with time spent on a skilled workers visa towards the 5-year qualifying period required for indefinite leave to remain. So therefore, if you are present in the United Kingdom operating within this system and you have staff members on the Tier 2 ICT and you want to keep them in the United Kingdom permanently, you should think about switching them over. Next one, please. Whilst nothing has changed with the sole representative visa route, I did want to touch on this as it represents another way of bringing overseas employees to the UK, which is incredibly popular, again, with US entities. The overseas representative visa can be granted to individuals who hold a senior position within the company and whose headquarters are based outside of the United Kingdom. These companies are planning to set up representation in the United Kingdom, where this individual is appointed to be the sole representative, solely responsible for the running of the business. No investments are required for this type of visa, which is obviously attractive. But there are other details and criteria that do need to be satisfied, such as the applicant must hold a senior position in the company, but most notably must not be a majority shareholder, and they must have the full authority to make decision on behalf of the company working on a full-time basis. Sole representatives can also extend their stay in the United Kingdom subject to certain conditions, and the route can lead to indefinite leave to remain, which again is very popular. So touching finally on a couple of the sector-specific visa routes, I wanted to highlight, given our delegates and audience today, for those engaged in the offshore wind energy sector and in the construction and maintenance of offshore wind projects in UK territorial waters. This concession has seen previous extensions granted to it, but we are now into the final stage of the concession, valid until the 1st of July 2021, which of course aligns with the EU withdrawal and the Brexit regulations, and will no doubt assist in the economic recovery that the country faces. I wanted to just confirm that the firms, during this period, firms involved in the construction or maintenance of wind farms within territorial waters should perhaps look to regularise the position of their workers under the routes that I've already touched on. And for those offshore workers where work is to take place beyond the UK territorial waters, visit visa applications can still be made to travel to the UK for up to 180 days in any 12-month rolling period. A visitor visa may or may not be required depending on the nationality of the worker. And as you know, certain nationals of certain countries may enter the UK as visitors without obtaining prior entry clearance visa. The offshore worker visa is popular for frequent or longer offshore work trips totaling, as I said, more than 180 days in the rolling 12-month period, and is often the most preferable route. It's issued for up to 12 months at a time, and it allows the workers multiple re-entry and residence in the United Kingdom during this period. And it does not crucially require specific permission to work under the points-based system. It does not, however, subject to one caveat, allow the employee to work within the United Kingdom or within the UK territorial waters. So finally, the most recent announcement came earlier this month and was actually contained within the Chancellor's budget. It highlighted the further modernisation to the UK visa route, with the government intending to introduce an elite's points-based visa, which will enable those with a job offer from a recognised upscaled company to qualify for a fast-track visa. There is to be reform to the global talent visa route to enable internationally recognised achievers to automatically qualify, and the launch of a new global business mobility visa by spring 2022 for overseas businesses, which may see an upgrade of the sole representative visa. So I hope that this hasn't been too dull and has been helpful for those seeking to navigate the rigours of the UK immigration system in this brave new world of ours. And I'll hand back to you, Brett.
Grace, no one will ever accuse you of being dull. It is vital information that firms need as part of the internationalisation process. So thank you for giving us that information today. And I'm sure if anyone has any questions, they'll come to you direct. Okay, thank you, Grace. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our next speaker, who is also one of our key in association partners today. We have two in association partners. One was the Greater Houston Partnership, who you will hear from each day. You've heard Jeffrey already. The other is Andy Grieve with his two companies, the GTech Innovation Centre out in Beaumont, the west of Houston, and also Hampco, his engineering firm. Now we're going to touch a bit on Andy's journey and what his different companies offer. So Andy, I'm going to let you do it with your usual dash of Doric.
Andy, you'll need to unmute.
There we go. That's right.
Okay, Andy.
Well, thanks, Stacey. Like I said, you're doing a great job trying to herd cats like us all the time and keep us right. So I know we've got 15 minutes. You can cut me off at 15 minutes if I'm tending to blab too much. But I said, wasn't 2020 enough? A scunner in here now and again. Now, Stacey, give me the translation there. It was an amazing year, but I always have to start with a bit of Doric because I've been here 16 years, but I still have a lot of trouble ordering takeaways, doing drive-throughs, trying to dial mobile phone hands-free. So I came here. Yes, next slide, please, Stacey. I came over here 16 years ago, planning to stay for 1 year, and the plan was to merge my company Hampco with another business here locally. It was an utter disaster, but we decided to stay. We began to like Houston, and finally got citizenship, joint citizenship 6 years ago. About 2012, we rebuilt the business, did a couple of good years, and decided to buy some land and build a place, build a facility of our own. We made it bigger than we needed and started GTech Innovation Centre as a co-working industrial space, incubator, anything to help companies that had the struggle I did. Being a foreigner, it took a lot of effort and a lot of help from organisations like KTEDC, Greater Houston Partnership, SCOA, SBA, Small Business Development Corporation, to help us raise the finance to do it. And so and that's what we're still providing. We're still providing this same co-working space and technical support. You'll see the next slide, Stacey, please. So I put up this slide last year. We were just entering into the pandemic. What was our 220 strategy going to be? Facing unprecedented uncertainty. Of course, the oil price had crashed, COVID-19, and the November elections, of course, were coming up. So Stacey, next one. And I'm keeping the same slide because unprecedented uncertainty was the same. It's not only the oil price it's uncertain, it's the whole oil business. And COVID-19 is still an issue, but all the variants over and above it. And finally, not November elections anymore, just US politics in general. Now, on the COVID side, I was going to mention that I got some medical advice from Brett about 2 months ago when I caught COVID. I lost all my taste and smell, and that didn't go into my lungs. I was quite well, but couldn't taste or smell a thing. So Brett was suggesting use burnt oranges. I remember saying burnt oranges. And I think, where am I going to get burnt oranges? No burnt oranges. So I've just been relying on burnt barley. And I've done all my Talisker, I've done all the Islay malts, and now I'm down into the lowlands. And it does work. Next slide, please. And then, of course, 3 weeks ago, we hit minus 10 degrees centigrade. A shock to the Houston system like you would never believe. Next one, Stacey. My pride and joy, Florida date palm at the front of the house, I wrapped it like I was told to before the snow came. A week later, and then a week later, I'm told it's dead. So that was a major shock to the local region. A lot of power lost, a lot of water. We all planned for the hot weather. We had an emergency generator, hot weather, but it just didn't come through. So next slide. I have a range of issues that I normally talk about, but they take too long, and tomorrow I will do a little bit more of those. But I want to give a little orientation of the region. So, no, next slide, next. To let you know, Grampian is 70 miles wide. Houston is only 15 miles less in size than that. And that ring road you see going around it is the New Grand Parkway. It's been in the plans nearly as long as the Aberdeen bypass, but it's nearly finished too. And it's 180 miles long. We're going to do a little tour now. If Stacey can organise, again, an orientation trip. But before we do that, of course, I still maintain that Grampian has a higher population than Houston. Next slide. So let's try the tour. So we're gonna start off in Aberdeen at the townhouse, and we really do miss Barney's hospitality here. We were there a couple of years ago with tea and scones on his couch. And we go over to Houston. I'm sure most of you have been in Houston, but this is just to give you an orientation. We'll first go to the Greater Houston Partnership to see Jeffrey at his place. And then we move across town a little bit and see the British Consulate where Richard's based. And from there, we'll head out west and head towards the Energy Corridor. A lot of people come to Houston and don't make it out to the Energy Corridor. This is a 6-mile stretch of the Interstate 10, where all the major operators and service companies are packed. But Houston's growth west is tremendous, and everyone's heard of Katy. Katy, 300,000 population. We come to the intersection of that New Grand Parkway, and our first building that we put up 4 years ago, nearly 6 years ago now, is just north of that. we took 11 acres there and built a building. In 2018, we sold that and moved further west through Katy to a small city called Brookshire. It's the size of Kintour, 5,000 population, but it's got tax advantages and opportunity zone. And we have a building there. But we also landed up expanding a little bit south and taking up a bit of land down in Pearland, which I'm going to talk about a bit more tomorrow. Pearland, it's joined to Houston effectively. It's the size of Dundee or Perth, but it's got a complete and very vibrant business and climate there. Our facility will be, we're just doing plans for it now, will be close to Pearland City Hall. And we've landed up having a very productive working relationship with the city, the mayor, and Chambers of Commerce down there. And in fact, I think Clay Pearson, the city manager, is joining into this conversation. But you're amazingly close to NASA. And I know Colin Black's going to be giving you all a good conversation and a good update on things on Wednesday. So from NASA, we would end our tour, take a quick trip down the coast, maintaining the space theme, go and see Elon Musk at Boca Chica and SpaceX. So that's a quick over tour. Obviously take you a few days to do it in reality, but hope you gives you a little bit better orientation there. Next slide, Susie. So just flip through these, just an orientation. We'll land up at the airport for a start, and then everybody's aware of OTC, which is down in the south. And then you get out to the energy corridor, and you head through Katy, which you've all heard of, and then out to Brookshire, and Pearland down in the south. And then you've got the I-10 that runs all the way through Houston. Of course, we're near NASA there, but the I-10 that goes all the way through Houston from the east coast to the west coast, 900 miles to Florida in the east, and 1,500 miles to California on the west. Next slide. This is a view of Interstate 10 as it passes through the energy corridor. It gets up to 26 lanes wide at one point. Now, I'm a chuchter from Durras and my wife's from Potterton. So coming onto these roads, the first thing you realise, you've got to reset your driving test. And that was the most terrifying experience I've had in Houston. My test examiner was an African-American policewoman, Glock at her side, 4'9" and nearly as tall, and she threatened to fail me because I went 5 minutes over the speed limit as we approached the test centre. But also bear in mind here that kids get their provisional driving licence at 15, and then they pass their test at 16. So you often see some big Texas trucks, they look autonomous, but it's just you can't see the kid or the steering wheel. This is the you quickly get used to the way of driving in Houston, and it's here. Amber lights mean definitely accelerate. Next slide. Have to mention medical centre. This is the greatest place on earth to be ill. The choice is tremendous. The healthcare is tremendous. Of course, it is. Of course, it's private. And but the choice is tremendous. This is only a small part of it. Next. Have to mention HoustonExponential.org. Please take a look at it. There's been a tremendous development in the innovation ecosystem here in the last 4 years. I would encourage you to check it out. Next. So just a very quick overview. This is our first facility we built. And like I said, one customer came in and took more and more space from us. So in 2018, we sold that and moved out to Brookshire. So next. This is our current facility. It was an existing building that we refurbished. Clean workshops, we offer training rooms, heavy duty workshop. Next. We've had everything in here from a 50th birthday party in the top right, and now it's full of surgical mask and N95 manufacturing lines. Down below there, we have millions in storage in the heavy duty workshop. And then on the left, we're really pleased to welcome Aberdeen company STR, who moved in with us a few months ago. And this is just Mike there getting ready for one of the amazing shipments they're doing of all their subsea technology. Now we've got a little introduction by the Mayor of Brookshire. If we can play that, Stevie.
Hello, Aberdeen Houston Gateway. I'm Darryl Branch, the mayor here in Brookshire, Texas. We're pleased to have G-Tech and Hamco in our city. Y'all drop by anytime and we will share some Texas hospitality with you.
I hope you heard that okay.
Yes, did. That's great. Darryl's a great guy, humble. He was ex-chief of police there, been tremendous help to us. Next slide.
Hello.
We have plans at Brookshire to build a series of small office developments, if anyone's interested, and you can find more on the website. But the idea of the new modern office, small office, clean, healthy, and we also offer the access to the industrial facility at the same time. Next. Yes, the next one. So, we said earlier, unprecedented uncertainty, but there is hope. My palm tree is not dead. 2 weeks ago, it actually come back to life and has grown 20 inches in the last 2 weeks. It's an amazing growth spurt. And like I said, hope still is. Next slide, Stacey. Next one is, Texans still like oil, and they still like big trucks. But they are opening their mind to the change. And I hope you can read that. I identify as a Prius. So thank you. I'm going to have a little bit more words tomorrow. And we're going to introduce Pearland and the likes. And thanks for listening. Too much to put all on in one presentation, but contact me anytime. Thank you.
Andy, thank you so much. And I agree that Andy is a great go-to resource. So for any Scottish company that is looking to internationalize, looking at Houston, yes, of course, Great Houston Partnership, and yes, SDI and EIC and all these great associations. But Andy has been there, got the t-shirt. He offers a variety of property solutions, both standalone and under one roof, and he also offers warehouse facilities as well as a well-known address, good connectivity, and some excellent mentoring with that wonderful dash of Doric. So thank you, Andy. Okay, and I think, as you say, Andy, one of the themes that's going to come out this week is that we need all the energies. We need the oil and gas, but we also need all the transitioning energies. And I don't think it's a choice of one or the other. It's all of them, you know. Okay, I would like to introduce, without further ado, my good friend in Houston, Travis Middleton, who was very useful and very helpful to me when I first started going to Houston, and I will forever remember that. And I look forward to seeing him in Houston again soon. But in the meantime, Travis, could you tell us a bit about, I know you've got two hats on. You're going to speak about Falls of Clyde later in the week and a bit today, but really you're here to tell us about Trademark today. Can you hear us, Travis?
I am now unmuted. There you go. Thank you, Brett.
Good morning, Travis. Good morning.
Good morning, Brett and Stacy. I am Andy. You know, I often think that when Brett invites me to these and he sets up the schedule that he's trying to get even with me about something because he always puts me behind Andy. And Andy's is so entertaining that I now get to bore you to death with employee benefits and commercial insurance liability. So thank you, Brett, for that. And Stacy, next year we're going to try to get away from this one. Very quickly, I also have online with us Caitlin Vohire. She's our Vice President for Employee Benefits here in Houston. And we have Jeremy Vohire. Jeremy is our Managing Director for Property and Casualty. Both of them, I believe, we're going to try to bring in and let them do their presentation on their particular pieces that we have here. The markets in the U.S. right now on the health insurance piece for employee benefits is moving very quickly, trying to assist companies and employees in obtaining and keeping health medical cover while the pandemic and the economic downturn is happening here. Now, I say economic downturn, when we say that, to me, and I think Andy may agree with me on this one, business is still extremely good and is surprisingly good for what is happening in and around us. So it's a period where we're learning to work virtually, handle a lot of our business in that manner. On the property and casualty side, Jeremy Vohire has been with us now for a couple of years. He's got some very good experience and absolutely is nailing some of the nuance of placing commercial health insurance, commercial liability insurance for new companies, especially moving into the U.S. and into the Texas area. So, and then Brett's also mentioned the fact that a second hat is the hat for the Falls of Clyde. Notice that David O'Neill is on with us today also. David's going to be presenting on Thursday on a great heritage issue for Scotland with bringing back a Scottish-built, or Glasgow-built, thank you Andy, Glasgow-built tall ship from 1878 that will be, hopefully we will have some news on that one very shortly about that journey back into Glasgow from Honolulu here shortly. But David's going to be talking on Thursday. So if from that point, Stacy, can you bring Caitlin in?
Yeah, if Caitlin, if you just want to unmute, you'll be able to join, or you have, perfect.
Thank you, Stacey. I appreciate it.
Okay, Caitlin's been with us. Caitlin's been with us for several years now. Caitlin is one of the top people in what she does. When she first came over to us, she had several of our clients that we talked to asked if they were moving in, if Caitlin was moving over with us, and when we told them yes, that's when they agreed to move over with us also. So Caitlin, thanks. If you go ahead.
Certainly. So my role with Travis is to discuss employee benefits. What we do is, as Andy was mentioning, with the large amount of choice that there is here in Houston with medical, particularly, we help employees navigate that. So when a new company comes here, our role is to help them evaluate whether they need to put in some kind of medical or dental coverage for the employees, or what options are available to them, how to keep them compliant with what the state requires, and really just to keep themselves competitive with all of the other employers that could be in the same space. Here, it is very important for employees to have medical coverage, but they're also looking for more than that. They would like the whole package. So dental, vision, retirement benefits such as 401k, life insurance, things of that nature, which can be quite overwhelming. But between Travis and I and our expertise, we can make it very easy to navigate and make it customized for each group and their needs. Travis, I don't think you're muted.
Okay, Stacy, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. So this is where Caitlin was talking about the differences in the type of medical cover that we can help you obtain for your employees, and it's more of a strategy situation. So as you're seeing yourself wanting to come in and open up the offices here, I would suggest contacting Caitlin several months prior to actually moving over, so that we can help you set up a strategy that fits your philosophy and how you'd like to do that. Stacey, we go to the next slide. Caitlin, you want to come back in?
Certainly. So these are the ancillary coverages that I mentioned. These kind of go along with the medical. The medical is, the most important for most employees, but the dental and vision particularly is something that the spouse is going to ask about. Long-term disability, of course, short-term disability, the 401k that I mentioned for retirement benefits, and then group life insurance are all very important. And together as a whole, they really do make a competitive package for companies coming here and occupying the U.S. market.
We work with several payroll companies also, so if you're looking to outsource your payroll from an in-house to an outsourced basis, we can help with that. We keep probably about 4 or 5 different payroll companies that have different capabilities that would that suit different type of companies. We do have 2 that work with specifically with international companies, so that you have a crossover between coming in from Scotland to the U.S. That'll want to understand what the differences are there. So thank you, Caitlin, appreciate that. Stacey, we can bring Jeremy in, and if we go to the next slide.
Howdy, everyone. Thank you, Trav, for introducing. Like you said, I run the commercial property insurance. I also do personal lines insurance here. We have many carriers that specialize in doing a lot of the energy insurance that we have out here, a lot of the engineering firms that we get out in the Houston markets, as well as we've got carriers specifically for the personal insurance needs of those coming from overseas. Some of our carriers are a little more tailored to less experienced drivers, or maybe folks with the U.S. market being very, very credit based for a lot of insurance. We have some markets for insurance for those who maybe not developed that quite so much in the U.S. yet on the personal side. So we've got many carriers suited for a lot of different things in the U.S. With the commercial markets, you're going to notice there are, it seems like a laundry list of different types of coverage that you need to get your operations going here, but it's really not that bad. We take care of a good portion of it. I like to think that most of the time my clients don't realize that what I'm doing is actually picking their brain for their operations for their company, and that we're just having a normal conversation. And through that, usually we can get most of the information we need without overwhelming you too much about what we'll need to write your coverage. You do have a very wide variety, but I'd like to think that we make it pretty simple.
Thank you, Jeremy. And Jeremy, what's your timeline typically for implement policies for a brand new startup?
So our ideal timeline is usually about 90 days out. That said, that doesn't always happen. We understand that. And usually once we've had an initial conversation, if need be, we can really push it at about 10 days. But again, 90 is far more preferable to start thinking about these things.
Very good. And when Jeremy's showing specialty insurance, really what we're trying to say there is if you have a particular niche in the market, that is something we can go back in to explain to underwriters for specifically what you're doing that may be different. So we may have a different coverage or a different way to approach that. So when Jeremy's asking for what seems like a very long list of information from you, it really is so that we can help obtain the correct insurance at the best premium pricing. So thank you, Jeremy, appreciate that.
Yeah.
Stacey, we can get the next slide. So this is just kind of a very quick overview that, as Jeremy said, we need about 90 days to get started on the health insurance to make sure we have in place when you need it. So if you have a contract that you're about to sign with somebody, we need to be starting work on those as soon as possible. These are some of the other pieces to the puzzle. We have seen problems. You may have already heard this from some of the other presenters, but just to reiterate it, immigration is important. We've actually seen an international company close down because they started work before they had their work visas here. They had a big project, they got started with it, and just got shut down and sent back out of the U.S. Your legal entity, I believe you may hear from Gus Bourgeois concerning this. It's important. We've got to have, Jeremy has to have your tax ID number for your legal entity before we can actually start applying to the insurance carriers for that coverage. And of course, banking with the international capabilities is always an important piece to that. The sooner when you know that you're moving over, the sooner we can be brought into the picture to help out. The better served we'll be able to find you what you're actually looking for. Next slide, Stacy. Thank you very much. Here's all of our contact information. This presentation will be available either through Stacy or myself, Caitlin or Jeremy, so let us know how we can help. But here's all of our contact information. We are good with Zoom, Teams, Skype, any of the messaging centers and such, instant messaging, all of the above. It used to be a tin can with a string, but now I've got Caitlin and Jeremy have taught me these other issues here. So please let us know how we can help. And again, Brad, Stacy, thanks for having us.
Thank you, Travis. And please all feel free to connect with Travis and his team on LinkedIn. As I say, Travis was a fantastic resource of information when I first started going to Houston, and still is. And he's wears many hats and has great knowledge of his home city. So I think he's a very much part of your market entry toolkit. So there we go. And he's also very partial to lapel pins and haggis, if any of you want to look after him. So thank you, Travis. That's great. Okay, I'd like to introduce you to our next speaker. And when you head out to Andes and you head out west, you go to a fantastic area called Katy. And today we have Lance LaCour with us, who is the president of the Katy EDC, the Economic Development Corporation. And Lance is going to tell us a bit more about Katy. I have been known to sneak out there on business, of course, but to also enjoy its leisure aspects while I'm there. So Lance, I certainly know I've picked many of the Katy boxes, and we've driven around it, and I'm proud to have been to the world's largest buckies, thanks to Katy EDC. But Lance, over to you.
Thank you, Brett. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. We had a little some technical difficulties this morning, but appreciate the opportunity to be with you this morning. I have a little hoarseness to my voice, so I apologize for if you can't hear me that well. But yes, Brett is always here on business, not usually on pleasure. So we'd love to have Brett out to visit Katy. And Andy, fantastic job on your presentation, as always. So I just wanted to give you a little update on some of the things that are happening in Katy, and also tell you a little bit about who the Katy area EDC is. Next slide. So Katy area EDC, we've been in business since 2003. We're a private, nonprofit, full-service economic development corporation. We provide relocation services, existing business services, that is to help existing businesses expand, workforce development and training. We help facilitate those items, development assistance to developers to help them build business parks and spec buildings. And recently we've added some additional territory to our jurisdiction, which includes the we're part of the Katy School District. We now cover the Cy-Fair School District as well. And I'll go into some of the demographics on that. Our organization has helped create about 20,000 plus jobs, about $2 billion in capital investment. And we also spend quite a bit of our time helping advocate for infrastructure projects. And we've helped with about $3 billion in infrastructure project advocacy over our time period. And we're most notably recognized for our school district, the Katy ISD School District, which is the #2 school district in the Houston area, as rated by niche.com. Next slide. So in terms of maps, and Andy had some great maps and great animations in his presentation, but you can see the proximity. Katy is about 30 miles due west of Houston on Interstate 10. And as Andy mentioned, 26 lanes wide, and in some places, tremendous road infrastructure. Grand Parkway also traverses the Katy area. And of course, the energy corridor. And you can see from this map the location of the energy corridor. We don't take in the entire energy corridor, but we have a good piece of the energy corridor where you have about 60,000 people employed in the energy industry. Next slide. And some of our recent projects and transactions, of course, everybody notes that 2020 was not the best year in terms of economic development. We did have some notable transactions and projects that the EDC was involved with. One, of course, is Amazon. Amazon opened a new sorting center here in Katy, which created about 3,000 jobs. Most of those jobs were part-time jobs. That project was 834,000 square feet. It created about 600 full-time jobs out of the 3,000, and will have a tremendous economic impact on the Katy area. I want to say it's probably close to $4 billion over the next 5 years. So we're very happy to have Amazon open that project, and EDC help with permitting on that project. CoreWorks is another company that activated a alternative site framework, foreign trade zone in our area. We work with CoreWorks on this project. They're a company that provides LNG equipment to LNG operations, and a small company, but is growing tremendously. We also had some Pepperell and Fuchs is a company that we helped locate in Katy here many years ago. Pepperell and Fuchs is a German-based company, and we worked with Pepperell and Fuchs to get their foreign trade zone designated. I think it just went to docketing status with the U.S. Foreign Trade Zones Board. This particular project helped save about 70 jobs, and will be creating about 20 new jobs in Katy. Some other projects, other transactions in the area included Samsung C&T, EnviroCleanse, which is a PPE supplier, Hartigen, which is located right next to our office at the EDC, Garver Engineering, Othon Engineering, and Gate and Energy. Next slide. And so just a few stats. I do want to say, Andy mentioned there's 300,000 people in the Katy area. Andy, we've had some more population growth since then. We have about almost 400,000 people in the Katy area now. We expect as new demographic information comes out at the end of this year, we'll have eclipsed 400,000 people in Katy. When I first came to Katy, we had 190,000 people. So we've had tremendous growth, and I can't take credit for all that. But the growth continues as well. We still have about 4 to 5% population growth per year. In fact, Katy ISD has a $600 million school bond issue in play right now, which will be voted on in May. Our area unemployment rate for Katy and for the for the parts of the region is about 8.5%. That of course is the highest it's been in a long time. In most of my tenure here in Katy, our unemployment rate has been around 5%. And so we're working to try to get that back down to 5%, which is considered structural employment. We have about our office vacancy is about 27%, which is very high due to the energy situation. Industrial vacancy is about 12%. Most of our economic development activity has been in the industrial sector. We've got quite a bit of activity, of course, in distribution and logistics, in e-commerce. We've got several other companies that have opened large distribution centers here, ranging from 400,000 square feet to 2 million square feet. Our housing starts are up. Residential growth continues at a record pace. Several of our master plan communities had record years in 2020, which is a great thing. We do have quite a few available industrial buildings available. 434,000 square foot building is available right next to the Amazon distribution center, and that proceeds down to about 150,000 square feet. And we have manufacturing type buildings available as well, all the way from 100,000 square feet down to 15,000 square feet. And entrepreneurship is strong. We're seeing quite a few former energy executives starting up new companies. In fact, there's one company we're working with now that's a PPE manufacturer that the owner was a former executive with a major energy company, and they are doing well and have plans to try to grow the company to about 100 employees. So we're working with companies like that to help them grow. And it's great to see that manufacturing is taking place in the United States and in the Katy area. And Brett, that's about all I have. I'd be glad to take any questions.
I would just like to, Lance, first of all, I appreciate you presenting today, because I know you've got a sore throat, and that's probably an under-exaggeration. You have my 100% sympathy. I don't know if you remember 4 years ago when I was on a trip to Houston, I developed laryngitis, and it was very sore, and it was difficult to talk. And you honestly, it's not easy when voice is not full strength. So I would like to just add my full strength voice today to say I've thoroughly enjoyed touring both Katy and Beaumont with Andy. And if you're going to Houston, take the time to do what I've done and go out, and Lance and his team will show you around, Andy and his team will show you around, and they flow into one another because you're heading out west, you're going, and there's some amazing things to see, a great variety of businesses in the district, and amazing choice of places to eat and drink and shop as well as business. So it really is a very good quality of lifestyle out west. And take the time, go and see Katy, and go and see Beaumont, courtesy of Lance and Andy. And if you need to be strategically close to another part, like the ship channel or the airport, or Jeffrey and his team are very well placed to advise you on the different regions. Okay, so thank you, Lance. I would now like to introduce another loyal supporter of the Gateway that has supported us over many years, over at least 8. And Frank is director and CFO of PKF Texas, and he is our tax and accountancy partner to the Gateway, and he's spent loyally coming over to Aberdeen many times, sometimes more than once a year, building relationships, and he's very well placed to advise any Scottish or UK or European firms that are looking at setting up in Houston, and the tax implications and the accountancy implications. So I think, Frank, without further ado, I hope to see you soon in Houston, but I'll introduce you online today. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Brett, and thank you, Stacy, for helping organize everything. And good afternoon to everyone in the UK, and good morning to those in the US. My name is Frank Landrino. As Brett said, I'm a shareholder with the firm PKF Texas. We're part of an international accounting organization known as PKF, Panel Kerr Forrester International. Our sister firm or affiliate firm in Scotland is one of the largest Scottish firms, known as Johnston Carmichael. And with the help of our affiliates around the world, we're uniquely positioned to assist companies either establishing themselves in the US or US companies establishing themselves around the world. And today I'd like to kind of go through some of the key items. I mean, a lot of times when people talk to tax professionals, we really are eager to go into some very technical information. But what I think what's really important is to discuss the business matters and what that you need to consider. And a lot of times people really just want to get started. They want to set up an entity. They just want to get started, but they don't really think about the longer term implications once the profits start to come and what happens when you want to bring some of those profits home. So rather than going through some heavy tax jargon, we're going to go into some of the what I consider some of the 5 key tax matters to consider when you do internationalize and come into the US. Obviously, to start out with, one of the things to do is to set up, what kind of entity or you're going to do to set up in the United States. Just like the UK, the United States has a variety of types of entities. And, if you have the basic corporate structure of a UK corporate entity, simply having a US subsidiary could do very well. But a lot of times tax provisions, especially with the tax reform that took place from with the 2017 tax reform, a lot of different tax provisions are available for one type of entity, but not necessarily another. So there's a little bit of tax competition among entities. One of the things we've often counseled with our overseas clients is that you want to make sure that any taxes in the US, if you work through a structure other than a corporate structure or any other type, you have available credits, US taxes. You're able to credit your UK income with US taxes if you use some other type of structure. Every once and again, not overly common, but we have mixed groups. You may have US owners of an entity or foreign owners. And one of the things that we often find is that a UK company may want to reward a local US person with ownership as an incentive to run and grow the business. So different types of structures rather than a basic one could be used. And then you got to consider US versus non-US ownership. If you have foreign ownership of a US entity that's not a foreign corporate type of ownership, you may want to use foreign blocker entities because the United States does have something called the US estate tax. And so a foreign individual that has an ownership in a US corporation would be subject to the US estate tax on because US corporations are US situs property, which would ensnare an individual in becoming a U.S. taxpayer at one point. And I'm sorry, Stacy, I need to go to the next slide. I should have directed you accordingly to the different bullet points that I was going through. Obviously, treaty benefits. The UK has a very robust, very attractive treaty network with the US and other countries, which makes the UK very attractive for US entities going into the UK, as well as UK based companies going into the United States. Rates do vary, though. Typically, the withholding rates on various items of income are most beneficial for corporate shareholders, a little bit higher for individual shareholders. Home base of operations, I have to say that the United States typically is not the best holding company structure. However, it can be good for setting up North American centric operations. A lot of times companies use the US as a gateway to other areas of North America, namely Canada and Mexico. However, the US entity typically does not make a good parent company for foreign subsidiaries if that US entity is owned by a UK entity. It's usually better to have the US subsidiary a brother sister type of company. Next slide, please. One of the major things is probably very key to structuring is how do you finance the US operations. A very common thing that people do is set up an intercompany advance. They don't really say it's debt or it's equity. The intention is to pay this back very quickly. There may be a hesitancy to make a permanent investment in a US entity, but then the hesitancy might be to say we're going to repay it back shortly. And so it becomes sort of an advance that sits there. There typically is no documentation or accrued interest or anything like that. And for US purposes, that tends to look like equity as opposed to debt because you don't have formal documentation that it is debt. So just be mindful of that when you come in. We need to talk about how you might want to structure financing. The United States, like many countries, have thin capitalization rules. We will disallow interest if the amount of interest is more than, let's say, 30% of what's called adjusted taxable income. So there can be a disallowance of interest in any 1 year, although typically any interest disallowed is carried forward to be possibly deducted in the future. There is the possibility to have a circular cash flow regime, which means that, you know, one of the common issues is that, well, there isn't enough cash flow in the US subsidiary, particularly early on, to pay back a loan. So that's why the hesitancy to do something other than an intercompany advance. Well, the IRS will look at a circular tax regime. In other words, the foreign entity, the UK parent company, will provide cash flow in the form of a debt structure, and then use that same debt structure to repay on a current basis a loan, but then have that circular back to be a further loan that's to be lent to the US entity. So there is the possibility of early on to have this circular cash flow, and for that to be respected. Of course, an appropriate interest rate would need to be determined. You know, transfer pricing rules come into play. You typically need a market rate of interest between intercompany debt structures. One thing to be mindful of, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in repatriation strategies. Base erosion strategies are very important. Right now, the current corporate tax rate in the US is 21%. We do have a new administration that came into office on January 20th. Due to other relief provisions and COVID measures and so forth, the United States is going to be looking for ways to pay for this down the road. And one of the proposals out there is to raise the corporate tax rate to 28%. In the UK, I believe by 2023, the UK is also looking to raise the corporate tax rate to 25%. So in terms of looking at deductible payments in the US to repatriate money back to the UK, you do want to consider the tax rate differentials or tax rate arbitrage. Foreign currency issues come into play if there's foreign denominated debt with the US entity. And of course, as I said before, documentation of financial instruments is very important, because you want to make sure that the whatever vehicle you use to provide funds is what is respected by US tax authorities. If you have equity in mind, you want to design it to be looking like equity. Same thing with debt. Next slide, please. Just a few, you can spend a whole seminar on transfer pricing. One of the things that, just like the UK, the United States has documentation requirements to document your intercompany pricing inherently with an inbound structure from the UK or any jurisdiction. There are going to be intercompany transactions, even if it's simply just to have intercompany services transactions. Often the home office do service type transactions, whether it's accounting functions, legal functions, IT functions. There's always support that the home office provides to the U.S. subsidiary, and that lends itself to an intercompany transaction, which is governed by transfer pricing rules. It needs to be arm's length, and one of the things that we look at in terms of providing a transfer pricing strategy is to look at your business models. Typically what I find with UK entities is usually that there's a service company in the US or there are distribution activities with the US subsidiary. And so you have decisions to make as to whether, let's say in the case of a distribution function or resale function in the US, whether you're going to be a limited risk distributor, which would be, for example, the US would have a known customer and would take flash title to inventory from the UK. And that typically lends itself to having very minimal profits in the US. And if that's your goal and strategy is to keep the profits back in the UK, that could be very attractive, particularly with respect to the rate differential between the UK and the US. But of course, the profits earned in the US have to be aligned with risks, assets, and capital. You can't have a robust set of activities and earn minimal profit, or vice versa. And obviously, if you don't have your strategy in line appropriately, there's always double taxation risk. If a U.S. tax authority makes an adjustment, there's not necessarily a corresponding automatic correlative adjustment back in the UK. You've got to take a look at that. Otherwise, there's risk of double taxation. Next slide, please. One of the things that I think that kind of goes outside of the world of taxation, but it is something to consider, is the workforce. In the United States, what attracts employees, and I've seen this with a lot of clients, is typically a U.S. company needs to provide not only compensation, but also benefits, particularly healthcare benefits that Travis and his company started talking about. That's typically something that makes a U.S. company very competitive. I actually recently had a Belgian company that needed to restructure their benefits package because they weren't attracting the caliber of employees that they needed to be successful, and they were always churning human resources. One of the things that we need to be wary of is that a lot of times, especially during the setup, UK companies may want to bring their own staff to help set up the entity or help organize and operate the entity. There is what's called permanent establishment risk, or the risk that there's a US tax exposure for the UK company if it uses its own employees. If you do intend to have employees from the UK in the US for a period of time, there typically needs to be some sort of a secondment agreement, and those employees need to be contract or some type of employees of the US company. Otherwise, you subject your UK company to US taxation, and that typically defeats some of the purpose of setting up a US subsidiary to begin with. There's always legal risk. So one of the things I always work with local legal counsel with respect to employee contractor agreements. Of course, there needs to be some type of substance in the US, usually at least one employee, if not more, to establish an actual activity in the US. And then you consider centers of excellence. There may be something from a talent pool strategy. You may want to do a particular activity on a worldwide basis here in the US based on your human capital strategy. And like I said before, the alignment of talent and the functions or risks that you take on in the US need to be aligned. And finally, what's probably, next slide, please, that's important is repatriation strategies. A lot of times when, and this may not be until 5 years down the road, hopefully sooner, the UK company coming to the US will have profits, and there will be a desire to bring those profits back. And you can do that all sorts of different ways. If the US company is using intellectual property that's developed and maintained by the UK home country, typically a royalty fee would be in order to be assessed that the US company will need to pay. As I said earlier, there's typically intercompany services that benefit the US entity that the US entity will pay for. Work with someone like myself to look at rate arbitrage strategies between the UK and the US, since the US typically has a little bit higher of a corporate tax rate. Use of withholding taxes and the treaty network. Typically, this is not an issue with the UK because the UK has an extraordinary treaty network and very favorable terms with the US. Typically 0% withholding rates if it's usually an 80% or more owned US subsidiary. And then you have to be mindful of local tax incentives. A lot of times in the US, there are very interesting local tax incentives, even at the state and local level, not necessarily just the federal level. And that may dictate your supply chain management. So for example, under tax reform, there's this incentive for exports for US companies that actually get you a lower rate currently in the US than you would get in the UK. And so local tax incentives need to be explored as well when you set up a US entity. And of course, align your transfer pricing strategy with your business models. You don't want to have, again, a very robust set of functions and then expect to earn only modest profits. It's got to be in line with the risks and functions and assets and human capital that you have to in order to have profits that are commensurate with the activities that you have in the U.S. So that's kind of a speed hot shot top 5 key issues. So that concludes my presentation, and we'll be available for questions at the end of the seminar. And I appreciate your time and attention. And please contact us if you're considering to come to the U.S. We'd like to talk to you typically before you actually arrive here, but we see all sorts of scenarios where we talk to people even once they arrive. So thank you for your time and attention, and thanks for your support of the Gateway.
Thank you very much, Frank, for that presentation today. Frank's top tax tips, very useful for entities. And I'm sure any of you that are looking for some tax advice, feel free to connect with Frank on LinkedIn or ask him in the Q&A, or if you want an introduction to any of the speakers today, ask myself or Stacey. And just going back to the regions, Jeffrey's made a very good point. We'll circle back to that in the chat. But Houston is a huge place, and it has many areas. So from a logistical point of view, please feel free to use the GHP, the Greater Houston Partnership, which is our key and association partner, as a go-to free resource on advice of the different areas of where might be appropriate. So all of the speakers are there for your use, but please do use Greater Houston Partnership's free resource as well. We'll come back to that in the chat, Jeffrey. So one final speaker, last but by no means least, and adding another dash of Doric with style and panache in Houston real estate and relocation format. Lorna Ramsey, would you like to give us a little bit of an update on how life is in Houston in your world?
Hi, good morning everybody. It is now 10 o'clock Houston time. We are having a fantastic start to 2021 in relocation. Real estate market is crazy, but not people coming from internationally, it's people coming from all over the world or all over the US. I have a little video and Stacey is going to play that. Hi, I'm Lorna Ramsey. I was born in Aberdeen, raised on a farm in the northeast, and worked for the P&J Farm Journal before moving to Houston in 2003. I've been a realtor with Keller Williams Metropolitan for 10 years and have relocated hundreds of families from all over the world to live and work in Houston. I've been the president of Houston Grampian Association, sister city to Aberdeen, since 2017. This is a wonderful organisation which is now 42 years old, running on both sides of the pond. Known for its great social and international cultures with tons of opportunities, diversity, affordable homes, great shopping, world-class education in both private and local schools, the rodeo, amazing sports and concerts, outstanding food, warm weather and customer service. When moving to Houston, location and getting the right home to meet your family needs is really important. The location will depend on whether you want to buy or lease, your office location, which school, if any, your children will attend, your budget, do you want a pool or no pool, but always try to make your commute to work and school as little as possible, as Houston traffic can always be a nightmare. Houston and the whole world has seen so many changes during 2020, with the loss of life, jobs, so many local businesses and some of Houston's finest restaurants closing. The beginning of 2020 was a very uncertain time for Houston's real estate market. With the oil and gas price being so low, I saw lots of expat families being repatriated back home. Houston saw lots of unemployment throughout the city. Schools were all closed. No one was allowed to travel due to the border closures, and most people were working from home. The deadly and destructive February winter storm that left so many of Houston area homes without electricity and water for 4 or 5 days could not chill the Houston real estate market. Houston February sales of single-family homes rose for the 9th straight month, climbing 1.2% with 6,049 homes sold. Prices reached historic heights, with the average price rising by 16.2% to $350,000. The median price climbed 12.6% to $276,000. All property edged up around 2% from February 2020. Total dollar volume for the month increased 17.3% to $2.4 billion. Houston rental was down. Leases of single-family homes fell 26.1% and the townhomes and condos fell 15.7%. We have seen lots of changes and growth all over the city during the pandemic. There are many new apartment complexes being built. We have a new $13.5 million competition golf course at Memorial Park, and there's also an ongoing $200 million renovation to add a land bridge, bike and pedestrian trails, indoor pool and rugby pitch, to name a few. Texas Medical Center also continues to grow with a $1.5 billion expansion program. There are many new hotels, and the Houstonian is undergoing a $45 million remodel. At West Dallas and Dunleavy near River Oaks in downtown, Regent Square is the new city centre with a new hotel, 740 apartments and 23,000 square feet of new retail and restaurant space. Hi, I hope you find all this information helpful. Thanks Brett and Stacey for another great gateway. Please contact me if you have any questions, and I hope to see you in Houston soon.
Lorna, that's great. I actually learned quite a few things from that video that I didn't know about. Yes. So some very interesting facts there that were brand new to me. So thanks for that. Now, before we go into the Q&A and the networking, I just wanted to give, in case anyone isn't here for that, I wanted to give special thanks again to our in-association partners today, Greater Houston Partnership and GTEC and HAMCO. I also wanted to thank our other sponsors today, PKF, McGill & Co, Trademark, and KTEGC. So there's so much information there. I'm sure you've all got questions. we'll go into a bit of Q&A, and there's some option for some speed networking as well. Those of you that haven't registered for tomorrow, we'll be back tomorrow with our Energy Transition and Subsea Day. So we will have speakers from Energy Transition, including Exxon, Halliburton Labs. The Greater Houston Partnership will be back to give us an overview. So we'll go from Energy Transition then into some great subsea examples. So lots of reasons to come back tomorrow. And we have top law tips from Boyer Miller, very well-known legal firm in Houston. So lots of reasons to come on tomorrow. But back to today, which was all about the overview of the market, doing business in Houston. So Q&A. Stacey, do we have any questions in the chat for any of our speakers?
We don't have any chat as yet.
Would anybody like to raise their hand in their box, or alternatively unmute yourself and ask a question to any of our speakers today? In the meantime, while people are thinking about that, I would just like to say, Jeffrey, question for yourself. The Greater Houston Partnership resource to Scottish companies, UK companies, European companies on a go-to starting point is totally free, isn't it?
Yes, it is. We are, I guess you could say, the first stop that companies should make when they're thinking about setting up a new operation in the Greater Houston region, or even if they're just considering Texas, because we can help you with a lot of comparative information. That we work, though, we work with our members, and we also work very closely with our regional allies. For example, an excellent example of this is Katy. So if a company was looking for, say, a warehouse space, for example, and they weren't quite sure where they should go, do they want an existing building? Do they want a plot of land to build their own and things like that? We can help quickly orientate themselves. Otherwise, they can be a bit overwhelming because our region is geographically spread out.
Yeah, I think Jeffrey, the one thing that people don't realize when they come the first time, even when they come back and haven't been for a while, is the scale, and particularly from this part of the world. And you can quickly advise on, for example, port regions, airport regions, proximity to key infrastructure. So I think what I would say to everyone today is please use GHP are with us every day this week for the different themes. So Jeffrey and his colleagues, they're there. Feel free to approach them if you are a firm that's internationalizing. And also, just as all the speakers today, Andy with his GTech and his Innovation Center and he can give you the aspect of a Scot that's been there and done that. And Frank will keep you right with tax, because Frank maybe leads me on to a second question, that it's very important to get the tax right from the beginning, isn't it? Because you so often hear of people that have maybe gone into the market very quickly and maybe reacted to, I guess, a contract win or business that's been won. And then they have to unpick stuff, and it's not so easy to unpick, is it?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think one of the things that is challenging is that when people first open up their company, they're not really thinking, that they're thinking they'll be very successful. Otherwise, they wouldn't bother to set up a company. But they're not really thinking about bringing funds back or repatriating earned funds from the U.S. back to the home office, because they haven't earned it yet. They're just kind of worried about just getting set up. And if you don't have some of those things in place, and it doesn't have to be all built in a day. You can just kind of lay the groundwork, and you can build it as needed. But if there's not any upfront planning about the day that you will actually repatriate funds, you could find yourself in a situation that you're repatriating, and it's not a return of a debt structure like a payment of a loan, but rather repayment of equity And some of those payments could be considered dividend payments, and it could have a result that you quite hadn't anticipated. So those are some of the things that companies kind of struggle with, especially down the road. And it's normal not to be thinking about that because you haven't earned your first dollar yet. So
yeah, it's that ability to think down the line, isn't it, Frank? And maybe just a similar question, Travis, that equally as well, that, you know, they have to think about insurance, which is not something they maybe think about to the same degree this side of the pond.
Brett, sorry,
Charlie, I'm in. Stacey, I'm actually here.
Oh, you are? Okay, I was going to
introduce Jeremy. Thank you. Yeah, no, appreciate that. Yeah, you're quite right, Brett. When the contract is normally being negotiated, we will receive a request from our client or prospect requiring that all of a sudden the person that they're gotten their contract from in the U.S. has stipulated the amount limits of the coverage that they need from a commercial standpoint. And so we have to put those into the applications to obtain the limits that they have to even be able to get on that person's property. So it's very important that as we're moving forward, that we actually can, are happy to review a contract for those coverages for the prospect or client.
Brett, can I add something on the tax issue?
Yes, please do.
Just to back up what Frank was saying, tax is always at the top of my list of the most difficult issues it's been moving here. There are so many different types of taxes. It's complicated when you look at sales tax varying from city to county to state. Your business personal property tax, you're paying taxes every year for everything that you own. There's a franchise tax in Texas, which is a tax on the privilege of doing business in Texas, which is different from an income tax in other states. There's even things, you get little acronyms like GILTI, global low income, what did they get for global intangible low taxed income?
That's right.
Which affects, it is very, very complicated. And you need experts like Frank. I can assure you it's much more complicated than it is in the UK.
Thank you for that, Andy. And I know that you speak with personal experience of having jumped across the pond and helped others to do so. So, yeah, I think sometimes Scottish people, UK people, European people maybe don't take some of today's topics, tax, insurance, maybe high enough up the priority list, and which I can understand because it's as you Frank says, it's something they haven't earned the first dollar yet, and you're asking them to think down the line. But these are all vital things that need thought about as part of the market entry toolkit. And
also property tax is huge. So compared to your community tax back home, a lot of people, if you're buying a $500,000 house, you're expected probably to have, depending on the area of Houston, it could be anywhere from 10 to 25,000 a year to pay in a house tax. Because you're paying for schooling and the water area, the mud area, so it's a huge figure that we are not accustomed to paying.
So I think maybe, Stacey, what we should do now is just ask our speakers today if any of them have a final comment, maybe before we go into the speed networking. So Jeffrey, do you have a message to leave, those Scottish, European, UK companies? We know that you're there, you're a free resource, you can be a go-to portal,
Right. Thank you, Brett. So yes, I'd just like to, I give an update about what's going on Houston every year at this event. But because we have so many of our members and associates here as well with PKF and with Katie, etc. I don't go too much into depth about the services that we provide companies that are looking to set up a new location. So the partnership covers 12 counties, so roughly the size of a small country. We have cooperation, that's our cooperation area. There are 35 separate economic development agencies in that area. So navigating them can be quite complex. So if you're looking at Brookshire, you're looking at Pearland or Conroe or Katy or the Port region, you can start with us and we can help you navigate that and quickly narrow your focus. As well, we have over 1,000 members. For example, BKF is also a member. So we have members that are banks, that are lawyers, that are real estate advisors, that people that can sell you land or rent you an office, but also people that can help you hire people, buy equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So we are, as you say, that paid for resource. Our services are free of charge, and I'm here to help. But if I were a Scottish company, I would first look at the resources that you already have available. Not many countries have the services on the ground the way that Scotland does. You have Scottish Development International here. That should probably be one of your first go-to entities as well. And you've got this wonderful network of people like Andy and Lorna and everyone here. And of course, if you already know where you want to go, that's great. I'd say go directly there. If you know you want to go to Katy, go directly to Katy. But if you don't know and you want to do some comparative shopping, etc., then I would say start with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think unless any of the other panel members got anything they'd like to say before we push the speed networking button and you get randomly mixed up with people? Frank?
I think the final comment I have is that many governments around the world, including the US, the UK, and other particularly Western governments, have provided a lot of stimulus funds for countries to make their way through the pandemic. So I think what will happen in the coming years, probably not in 2021, but probably 2022 and going forward, as countries get out of the pandemic, I think it's fair to say tax rates are most likely going to go up in a lot of these countries to enable governments to pay for past stimulus funds. Those strategies that may have worked in the past may need to be reconfigured. So please get with someone, whether it's your local country, tax council. Of course, you need to work with someone in the US like myself and my firm, kind of see what's the latest with regard to tax issues, and maybe prior planning strategies or need to be revised, recalibrated, rethought in light of the fact that governments are going to be putting forth new tax proposals in a big way all around the world.
Andy, any last words from yourself?
Well, I mean, I just always say that doing business over here is no different than anywhere else. You need a good product, a good service, and a good network. But just don't underestimate doing it quickly here, just with the scale. And there's an overwhelming amount of support if you need it. But I always say, don't think that you can do business in Houston by coming here every couple of months and spending a couple of days. It needs commitment. You need to invest the time and the effort to do it. But if you've got a great product, great service, it'll succeed. That's it, Brett.
Thank you. I'm not sure where Brett's disappeared to. Well, I think.
Thank you, all our speakers and supporters and delegates. Stacey is now going to mix us up for a bit of meeting and speed networking the last sort of 10-15 minutes. So Stacey, push the button, Stacey.
Thank you,
Stacey.